Okay, so hello and welcome to everybody. My name is Zeb Feldman. I'm your Sema OE3 business rep, and we have on the call, I see 4 members of the Court Advisory Council. And as you know, we did make a call for volunteers. So we have some additional folks that we will be considering as a council as well. CAC, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves before I delve into sort of the agenda for today? Ravi, can you start us off? You're muted, Ravi.
Thank you, sir. Hi, I'm Ravi Ganji. I'm IT Applications Manager.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. And Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Gall. I work in ISP.
And Georgia? You are muted, Georgia, if you're trying to talk. All right. Oh, there she goes.
I'm Georgia. I'm with Facilities. Sorry.
And Alex.
Howdy all, I'm Alex, Hall of Justice staff attorney here in my lovely digs at Hall of Justice.
And not present, but who were integral parts of the negotiation are Dimitra Alvarez, who is not here, and I don't think it's any secret, is slated for retirement. And also Laura Romero, who is a serving member of the executive board and was also involved in the negotiations. So I wanted to have today's meeting for several reasons. The first is to update the membership on the status of our current cost savings and why that's so relevant with the contract addendum that we were able to come to of June 26th, where Sema and SEIU came to agreement with the court, excuse me. And also I wanted to review those savings and what they meant. And also I wanted to clarify the layoff language and provisions because there seemed to be some confusion exactly about it. The good news that I kind of have is that hopefully with our preliminary examination of the savings, we won't need to apply any of the layoff language because I think we've achieved the layoff protection that we wanted out of this addendum. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is put the actual language in the chat window so that you all will be able to see and download it. It should be familiar to you, but there you go. And that should be a document that if you, sorry?
Laura is on.
Okay, thank you. Laura, we already did introductions. If you want to introduce yourself, please go ahead.
Hi all, my name is Laura. I know most of you, and I'm the current executive board member for the court. And we're having elections this year, so I bugged some of you. Thank you for signing my nomination.
Thank you, Laura. And posted in chat just now is the Sema court notice. As a reminder, Laura, I know you're joining late. Anyone who joined a moment late, we are recording this meeting. About a dozen or so people emailed me and said, hey, I can't make it, but I really want to hear what's being transmitted. Can you please record the meeting? So just bear that in mind in case you are planning any outbursts about your boss or something. Just know that this will be recorded and will be posted. So please don't message me privately if that's something we need to talk about. So you will have reviewed and seen the furlough language and related measures as the agreement is called. So I wanted to cover that and the cost savings associated with it. You may recollect that we have agreed in part of this document to attempt to achieve a certain dollar savings, which I'll share my screen now, which preliminarily we have achieved. And why this is so important to us is that if these numbers hold, hopefully everyone can see my screen. If these numbers hold, it means that we will enjoy complete layoff protection for this fiscal year. So let me go through this and we can talk about exactly what this represents and why it is important but not certain. Okay, so first off, these are the 3 categories here of savings. You can see what I've highlighted. Just to be clear, can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see my share screen? Okay, I see a bunch of thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, So there are three types of savings that we are contemplating in this agreement and in this current budgetary crisis. The first is furlough, which is the 1 day per pay period that people are out that we agreed to for the duration of this. The second is VSIPs, also known as the voluntary departure or golden handshake. That's those cash payments that are coming in for people who are separating from the court, excuse me, I keep saying county. Most people who are separating from the court are taking retirement, but some are separating and just taking the money and going on to something else, right? And then we have the long-term leave. So these are people who are saying, I am not drawing a salary for the next fiscal year, and I'm bowing out of court employment. So current savings is $3,587,000, and that takes into account the payouts that people have, that the court has to make for people who are taking advantage of the voluntary separation. So you'll see here, we agreed that there's a $15 million deficit. We agreed that 20% would be covered by the court. So our share of the number we're looking at is 12 million, not the full 15. And then our share of that is 29.7%. What do I mean by our share? I mean that Sema's percentage of court payroll is 29.7%. So we are responsible for a $3,564,000 share. You could see here with the current reductions, we're at $3,587,000. So we are barely over this threshold. Why that's important is here you could see this was our identified savings, right? And we've met 3,587 and we needed to get to 3,564, which we have. So we have a surplus, if you will, of $23,000. So what that means is, assuming status quo, and I'll talk about why we can't assume that, assuming status quo, we will meet the necessary savings and exceed it by $23,000. Necessary savings means that we've achieved it at this moment. It means that we will achieve layoff protection for this fiscal year, right? Think the next 11 months. That's particularly important because if the court experiences additional shortfalls, they will not be able to lay off Sema members. They will have to lay off other staff, executives, cut contracts, cut other non-bargaining unit members, right? So that's very critical for our unit. Anything that we achieve beyond this at the moment with the current estimates, that's $23,000, goes into reducing the number of furlough days that current members have to take. So the more we exceed the savings by, not only do we achieve that layoff protection that I was talking about, but you will see a reduction in furlough days taken. So let's pretend by the time we get to the end of this, 2 more people sign up for a voluntary reduced work hours, and that increases this number to, let's say, $100,000, then that would result in a further reduction of furloughs. What I want to impress upon people is this is a very thin margin right now. If just 1 or 2 people rescind their VSIP, we would be in a situation where we would no longer achieve layoff protection. So obviously, many people who are on this call will have made their own decisions or have already decided that they are planning on taking advantage of the voluntary separation. Some people still have the ability to not sign that. They maybe haven't signed certain agreements yet, or they still have that window that the court set up where they can reverse their decision. So if just 2 people do that, we won't hit that savings timeline. Obviously, everybody has to make their own decisions for themselves. I just am imparting to the unit that we are very, very narrowly meeting our goal. And if a couple of people change their minds, we won't meet that goal. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden layoff provisions get triggered, right? We have the first 10 pay periods that we're shielded, but it means that after that, the court may look at us again for reductions. So certainly if we see people not take advantage of the VSIP that have already committed to it, then we really need to redouble our efforts to get folks to voluntarily reduce their work hours to make up, voluntary reduced work hours to make up that spread. Otherwise, we would, after 10 pay periods, be in risk of possibly seeing cuts again. I see Laura, you posted a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
That I had a question too.
I can go after.
Oh, I'm dialed in. I'm not on the computer, so I can't see.
Okay.
My question was just, you're mentioning additional people signing up for voluntary reduced work hours, and I just thought that like July 15th was like the deadline. So if you could explain more about that, that would be helpful. That's all.
Sure. I can take that question right now. So here, let me go into, I'm going to share a different screen. And this is the agreement itself. So you guys should be able to see this. There are several times that are set here. Let me find, if also other, okay, here we go. You'll see the highlighted section. This is under voluntary reduced work hours. There's a new application window for fiscal year 2021 as part of this agreement, and you must apply on or before September 18th by the end of pay period 6. So this particular negotiated addendum to the contract allows and creates a special application window that does have the September 18th close. So that means that individuals who, and hopefully this answers your question, individuals, there was another window that closed, but this contract creates, or this addendum creates a special window where additional people can apply for this VRWH. And as long as it's submitted by September 18th, you would be able to take advantage of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Laura, since I think that question was answered, Laura, did you want to restate or ask your question?
Yes, in terms of the numbers that we just looked at the total savings that you show, are these numbers directly provided by the court? Because I don't want to discuss something where this is what we think the numbers look like in terms of savings and this is what they say. And so if we are on the same page, then we're looking at apples and apples.
Yes, and to your point, yes, this was provided by the court. Their preliminary estimate was provided last week. The updated estimate was provided this morning, which the CAC should have. You should have that Excel spreadsheet in your inbox, and that this was furnished by the court. Our agreement with the court does allow us to meet with them once the close has occurred, and then we will be able to kind of audit, I guess, if you will, what their numbers are. So these are not final numbers, but these are the court's numbers. This is not like I sat down with Alex last night and on a cocktail napkin came up with this, right? This is what the court is saying they are estimating at this point. And let me explain a little bit further too why I say estimate. The first is that there are 3 individuals who have not yet signed the agreement. So we're assuming that's built into the number. And also there's a final deadline for VSIP people to pull out, which is September 2nd. But the very latest date, VSIP people could withdraw by September 2nd. And then also we additionally have the VRWH, which that window closes on September 18th. So there's an opportunity for us to make up a little bit of savings if additional people want to apply by September 18th. Presently, and I'll post this in chat, here are the current numbers that we have. Oh, I see someone else put something in chat. I'll get to that in a second. We have 2 people who have applied for long-term leave. We have 2 people who are currently on VRWH, and we have 18 people with VSIP. That's including the 1 applicant that is already withdrawn. And I've heard a rumor that 1 other person may withdraw their VSIP. I do not know, someone privately messaged if that includes a particular personality. I do not know if that personality is the 1 person who has withdrawn or not. I've heard rumor, if you will, that 2 people have contemplated withdrawing or have withdrawn. I don't know which of the one of those 2 is encompassed in the 1 withdrawal to date. I'm anticipating 1 additional withdrawal.
does that mean that the numbers that we have reflect 16 VSIPs?
The numbers we have are anticipating 18, not including any additional withdrawals. There's one person who, they would have been 19, but one person who has withdrawn. And somebody else, people do have until the 2nd, depending on when they applied, they could withdraw as late as the 2nd to pull the trigger and not take advantage of it. So conceivably, if tomorrow somebody who you heard might be withdrawing chooses to withdraw, it would impact those numbers. So these numbers are not final. We're at kind of a razor's edge, if you will, as to whether we achieve the full layoff protection or not. Anke, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, states, when will we know approximately if and how many furlough days gets reduced? Would we get money back? You could get money back. What would likely happen is, let's say we exceed the number, the goal that we need by September 18th. At September 18th is the target date because that's the last time to put in for VISA or VRWH, voluntary reduced work hours. Then we would meet and confer with the court, make that reduction if necessary, and you would get some money back. Right now with the $23,000, we're exceeding that just by a hair's breadth. So you're probably looking at the reduction of 1 furlough day or portion of furlough day. And you would see a very modest increase in future pays.
Yeah, that's about a third of a day, so it's almost negligible.
Yeah, it would be very, very negligible. It's less than 1%. In terms of the 1 day per pay period represents approximately a 10% pay reduction. It's less than 1% of that. For folks that are, if I can trouble you, as long as it's not an actual confidential question, please post that publicly in chat or ask it through an open mic. If you do need your membership or your question shielded for whatever reason, then go ahead and message me or one of the members of the CAC privately. But otherwise, it's helpful if it goes to everybody. Let's see, someone is asking privately. Let me just read this and see if it needs to be private. Okay, the question is furlough impacting our vacation and sick accumulation? It should not be, is the answer to that question. Another question, the 3% pay increase should be applied in August, correct? That is correct. We have not negotiated away our our hard fought contractual increases. Those will be occurring as scheduled, and the next scheduled one is in August, so that is accurate. One other private question. I can't predict this, so let me read the private question. Do you believe that we will achieve the savings by September 18th? I sure hope so. We have a very good bite on it right now. If 2 or 3 people withdraw their VSIP, then we could be in significant trouble, and then I'd alert the unit immediately on September 2nd, hey, we're short this amount. If anyone is interested in voluntary reduced work hours, please seriously look at that because we need to make it up. As of right now, we have achieved the furlough protection, but we can't count on it because it really is a razor's edge. You know, when you're talking about can one of the co-hosts mute that person, please?
Yeah, we need to mute Robbie. Yeah.
Okay, I just muted him. I didn't know who had the open mic there. Robbie, you can unmute yourself if you need to talk. I can't state whether or not we would achieve that. Just because, you know, we have a good bite on it, but we do have individuals that do retain the ability to say, hey, I don't want to separate. I've changed my mind. And that's a right that you have. It's one that will have an adverse impact to the people who stay behind, to everyone who stays behind. So, but that is your absolute right. I don't want to dissuade you of that. Just do it with your eyes open and know that there is a consequence to that. Of course, there's no guarantee. Just because we don't have a layoff protection guaranteed for the full fiscal year, that doesn't mean the court's going to lay us off. It just means that there is that ability for the court to do that. Okay, someone is saying, I don't want this read aloud. Let me read this and figure out how I need to respond. I don't know how to respond to this. Okay, so I'm going to respond to this generically. The question is about the court budget and if they increase their deficit. The court's able to do that. It doesn't impact us. I mean, it impacts us in the sense that we are employees of the court, right? But it does not impact our target number. Our agreement is based on a $15 million deficit and is based on a $12 million labor shortfall that we need to worry about. And even more specifically, I'm going to share that screen again. It is defined in our contract that we are only contemplating, let me share this screen so you can see the number. Oh, I'm sharing my calendar, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. I want to share this. Okay, you should be seeing the spreadsheet. This number, and so you see the 12 million, which is based on, at the time, what the court was contemplating, a $15 million deficit. Our share is $3,564,000, period. If the court decides that it has a $20 million deficit or a $2 million deficit, our share for layoff protection is $3,564,000. So that's it, regardless of what other changes happen with regards to the court. Okay, I see a lot of other non-private questions have come in. Let me see this here. I see our vacation and sick accruals are impacted. That certainly could be the thing that we absolutely have protection from is with the VRWH that doesn't impact those accruals. If the furloughs are impacting the accruals, that is possible. We did not specifically shield those from the agreement. So thank you for sharing that, JR. Kim, recent press release states $16 million deficit. I've read that as well, that there was a greater cut from the state than they thought. So good information to have. Darren, can we take more furloughs days to avoid layoff if budget not met? There is not the ability to do that in the contract. We would have to reopen negotiations with the court if that's something that you all wanted to do. I think the cleaner way to do that is have a number of people volunteer for the VRWH. I would recommend that before we reopen the agreement, especially because if we try to reopen the agreement, we do run the risk, as you all are pointing out, that there may be a higher deficit than was originally contemplated. And if were I a negotiator for the court, if I said, hey, this bargaining unit wants to reopen the addendum, sign me up because I now need 14, I want to raise that 3587 number, excuse me, the 3564 number to 4 million. And we don't want, I would advise against that. So could we, to your question, Darren? Yes, we could. I would recommend against it because if I were the court, I'd come back with a higher number. Anke asks, would there be layoff protection for certain departments if their employees are under a certain number of people who are left? For example, FCS. No. So I guess yes and no. Let me get into this. Now this might be a good segue to actually discussing the layoff language and seniority and what that means. But before I go into the layoff language, I want to ask if there are any other questions about this document here and the savings that we've achieved. I also want to pause. I realize I've been talking a lot. I know the CAC may want to add some commentary or questions as well. So let me pause and turn it over to the CAC and make sure everybody understands what this document represents.
I don't have any comments. In terms of the numbers, I think my big question is if we can just keep be posted or notified if any additional people withdraw their application, because that will change things and we might need to set up another meeting to crunch numbers.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, and that's true. Right now, these are preliminary numbers. We wanted to share them as quickly as possible, and especially over the last 2 weeks, I've had probably a dozen people ask me with questions about specifically the layoff procedures. Hopefully our e-blast just to the court clarified some of those questions, but I just want to do it in live time. so we can actually respond to those questions. Anything else the other CAC members or questions had? Questions from the
I wanted to chime in and say, I think I can answer that last question that was asked about will there be layoff protection for understaffed units? Not technically, no, because that's not what was negotiated. Everything is possible, but we're so close to the number that we need that if there was a layoff, it would be one or two, and court would be smart about it. They wouldn't go and take somebody from an understaffed unit. So just think about it the way you would if you were in management. You'd have to take it from someplace where they could afford it. So that's if they even do it, which I don't think it is going to happen, even if we do fall a little bit short. But that's just my prediction.
That's right. That's right. And Kim, you are correct. It is not calculated in the numbers right now. Kim posted a question to everybody. And that is an unknown right now. There are only 2 people who signed up for voluntary reduced work hours, but it would be a savings. You can do up to 20% of your time as voluntary reduced work hours. So it is a modest savings to the court, right? So think about a single departure or single long-term leave. That's 100% of salary, whereas a asterisk, right? It's 100% of salary for a long-term leave. It's prorated, and they still have to pay benefits, but it's the bulk of the salary. The VRWH is something much less than that. With 2 people, you're looking at maximally a 20% per person, and they're still paying full fare on benefits and accruals for the VRWH.
So Zach, this is Georgia. Given that VRWH deadline is September 19 and any withdrawal of VSIP deadline is September 2nd, would you safely say the court will have a better or hard figure with where Sema stands after September 18?
Yes, in fact, I would go further than that. I would say that we would have a firm view on September 2nd of what the numbers will be, and that will give us as a union, assuming there's interest amongst the membership, to say, guess what, guys, we've met our needs. If anyone wants VRWH, go ahead, but it's not necessary. Or we might be in the position of saying, we fell $100,000 short. That means we need minimally 6 people to do a 20% VRWH if you want to achieve layoff protection, right? So I think that our next key date is going to be September 2nd. Oh, someone's just coming into the office here. Pardon me 1 second. The other staff person here at the office is handling. Thank you, Mary. Sorry. Okay, I see a private question. Let me see if I can read this out loud. I would say yes. Okay, so here's the question. If an employee decides to retire not utilizing the VSIP anytime between now and before any layoffs take place, will the court take that into savings into consideration? I would say yes. It's not part of this agreement. I would argue that it needs to be tabulated. However, here's kind of the rub on that. It has to be practicable, right? If I frankly am not that concerned about layoffs for our unit because, as Alex pointed out, we're going to get somewhere very, very, very close to the number, right? Unless I'm really surprised and everybody bails out of retirements, which I just don't see happening. So let's say we're $80,000 short. I just can't imagine that the court's going to lay off 1 person for that. Maybe they will, but we're talking about 1. Also, why I say, would we want to capture that credit if someone decides to retire, but it's past VSIP, right? They can't take advantage of it. Yes, I think we can claim that credit as savings. I think we can make that argument. It's not allowed specifically under the contract. The challenge is it would have to be early enough in advance that the court can really bake that in. If they're like, oh, we sent out the layoff notice and then 2 days before that person's supposed to be laid off, someone says, guess what, I'm retiring. It's just too late, right? As a practical matter, it's too late. So I would encourage people to, if you're thinking of doing that, make it known ahead of time. But yeah, I don't think so. Or I think we would be able to capture it. It's not guaranteed, but I think we would be able to. Kim, oh, I already addressed your question, the public question about the voluntary reduced work hours. Okay, I'll pause again for a moment, and then if there aren't further questions or unmutes to come in, then I
Just to-
will go
Yeah, I
ahead.
wanted to clarify, Zeb. So if we do not meet the numbers, we have until September 18, is that correct, for folks to submit voluntary reduced hours? That's the next deadline beyond September 2nd, getting the numbers. So once we have all the numbers, hopefully
Right.
by September 2nd, then we're going to have that window of 16 days for folks to consider turning in applications for voluntary reduced hours.
Correct. After the
Okay.
second, we'll have a clearer picture. It will come into focus, and then people could additionally apply for BRWH.
Oh, there's a date. Okay. I was looking at the agreement and I couldn't find that date, but now I have it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on page 1. Or you're talking about the September 18th date, Laura? Yeah, page 1, 5C, page 1, 5C. I'm looking something up from an individual who asked that this be read, not be read. I really encourage you guys to make these things public because it's probably a question other people have. Just bear with me one moment. While I'm looking up this question, yes, it's too late to take VSIP. It is that I can answer right now. It's too late to take VSIP. While I'm looking up this answer, CAC, can you lead into the layoff and seniority, define seniority for the membership, please?
So I could try, and everybody back me up if I'm inaccurate. So we're looking at days of service with the court. So if you worked, for example, I worked for the county before I worked with the court, those days of service would not apply. So we're looking at those dates when layoffs are going to happen. If hopefully not, they do happen. When they're figuring out who is going to be laid off, they're going to look first at classification. So if we focus on the classification, not necessarily straight days of service. So I could have more seniority than someone else, but depending on what classification I hold, I may be laid off before somebody who has less days of service if they target my classification. So if I am a person in my classification with the least seniority, I would be the first one. And that's how they are going to be able to select based on their needs who gets laid off. So if we have few folks in family court services, we're very understaffed there, they might not select those classifications. So they might select a classification where we have more people and the court will be able to accommodate, still serve the public with fewer folks in that classification. And I'm sorry that I'm not stating it more elegantly, but if any questions, please, I'm happy to clarify.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate you starting off the conversation. So yes, and in brief, seniority for Sema is unlike seniority in Skippy and SEIU. It is days of service, as Laura pointed out. It's not days in classification. So however long you've been working for the court, that is your seniority. Now, where I think there was some confusion is it is days of service, that's clear, right? Where the confusion is, does that mean that the court has to lay off the least senior person or not? And Laura answered that question beautifully, which was the court selects a classification and then lays off the least senior person in that classification. So to the earlier question, I have to scroll up to see, Anke asked this, people who are left in FCS, if FCS is understaffed, most likely the court would not choose that area to have layoffs. However, they could, right? The argument being maybe everybody's understaffed, right? So it's just a poor choice of what is it that I pick? Everybody's understaffed, so what is it that I pick that I'm even less staffing? However, where I think some members had confusion is, I have 20 years of seniority. I'm in a one of classification. Does that mean that I'm immune to layoffs? Because I know there are people who have 5 years of seniority. No, it does not. If the court chooses to eliminate your one of classification, it doesn't really matter what your seniority is. You're the only person in that classification. And let me explain why. I'm going to use a really silly example. Okay, I know we're not represented. We don't represent the deputies in our bargaining unit. If the court wanted to eliminate deputies because they don't want to pay for it anymore, they don't need to, for some reason, they get robots that do this or something, right? And they want to eliminate a deputy position. If the language was they have to eliminate the least senior person, well, let's say all the deputies have 20 years of service. Well, they want to get rid of the deputies. They can't, right? Because they would say, okay, I want to lay off 5 people. I want to get rid of those 5 deputies, but they all have 20 years of service. They'd have to lay off the least senior Sema people, whoever those are. And let's say that means that 3 court managers and 2 management analysts get laid off. Well, as a practical matter, that doesn't help anything. We then have these deputies that we don't need anymore, and we've laid off people that are providing services that we do still critically need. So what the court does is they identify a classification, and the least senior person in that classification goes. Now, here's where seniority does still come into play, and I'm going to share my screen. You should be seeing the excerpt of our contract. And yes, to your question, days of service can be found on your pay stub. And I'm going to be relying on those of you that can see it in your payroll system. It should also be viewable there, but I haven't confirmed that firsthand. Okay, this is Article 14, Layoff Procedures. We've already talked about definition of seniority. Here's where seniority continues to help you even if you're in a one of classification or you're in a classification that's a jeopardy for some reason. Layoff is often misconstrued as meaning you've been fired and you're going out the door. That's not what happens under our contract. It means that the layoff provisions are triggered, okay? So order of layoff. In our example, you've already been the person who's identified of laying off, but it is good for you to know this. First, extra help employees go, then probationary employees go, then non-probationary employees, right? In this circumstance, if you're a one of code, there's nobody else in it to worry about. So notice of layoff, you get it, you get the notice, you have 30 working days, right? Employees given 20 days notice, the union gets the 30. Now, here's where seniority becomes very important. This is what happens if you've been notified of layoff. First thing that happens is in placement. You guys can read this on your own. In brief, what it means is that you have an ability to look throughout the court, any position that you are qualified for that is vacant, you can claim. Unlikely to be a possibility in these extreme budgetary circumstances, right? There's probably not going to be very many vacancies lying around. So if there are, you can claim them, but unlikely. Here's where probably helps you out a lot more is in section B and C. If an employee in the court cannot agree to an in-placement position in accordance with 14.6 above, and there are no available positions as defined in, oops, let me scoot this over. As defined in 14.6a above, the employee may exercise displacement rights, also known colloquially as bumping, An employee with previous regular status just means you pass probation, in a classification shall have the right to claim such position in the most recently held classification by displacing the least senior person, where the employee has seniority greater than at least one other or more persons in that classification. The person displaced will then have rights under this article. So let me give you an example. You were a senior management analyst and you promoted to a one of classification. And that one of classification gets eliminated. Well, there are many senior management analysts. So you can displace into your former held code, in this case, senior management analyst, and claim it. Let's say there's someone there with 15 years seniority. Well, you have 20. So you bump the least senior person and claim your old code at your old pay, right? So you don't keep the higher level pay. You go down into whatever. Now, then that person in turn can claim maybe they were senior management analyst, then they bump into a management analyst, and so on and so forth. So it sort of starts a domino effect. Also, where seniority even helps you if you are laid off is lower level positions. In the event an employee does not have enough seniority to claim a position under section 14.6b, you can't bump because everybody in the senior management analyst position has 21 years of experience or seniority or more. So you can't displace them with your 20 years. The provisions of that section shall be applied to each subsequent lower level classification in which your regular status was formerly held. So now senior management analyst, associate management analyst, however, you can bump on down to any position you ever held in the court until you find one that there's less seniority in, assuming there is, right? So all of those things have to happen before a very senior person goes out the door. So I hope that answers that question and kind of lays to rest a little bit of the controversy or confusion about that. I'll pause here so that the CAC and various members who are on the call can raise additional questions. Also stop the share here.
This is Ravi. I have a question.
Sure.
I mean, to better understanding this whole thing, what you explained, I'll give my example. So let me know if I'm correct or not.
Okay.
So right now, supervising analyst, this is IT manager, the supervising technology analyst, there are only two positions.
Okay.
One Zing and myself, and Zing has retired. Now, Court wants to come, I mean, if the layoff situation comes and if they come and they can say, we want to lay off this position, your position. Since I'm the only one person there, and I have 3 software engineer vacant positions that are not yet filled, it's over there. So if I'm being laid off, then I can go and claim that I can be a software engineer.
Okay, I'm just posting this in the court wants to lay off position X. I am position X and want to claim position Y. Can I? Okay, so the answer is nuanced. Yes, if you held position Y previously. Or if you meet
Regular status, right?
right, if you held it, and if you achieved permanence, right, permanently, and or if you are qualified for that position, right? So here, and I'll go back to that. So let me really look at your example, Ravi. Did you hold that lower level position and achieve permanence in the court?
No, not in this court.
Okay, then you would not be able to claim it. I'm going to share my screen again. Then in your example, you would not be able to claim it under displacement. You can't bump someone else or say, that's mine. I have a right to that position. What you could do though, is you could claim it under in placement, right? So because you meet the minimum qualifications of this position here, meet the minimum qualifications, and it's a vacant funded position, you would be able to go into that code and claim the software engineer in your example.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, I see a couple of questions have come in. Does bumping include bumping into a limited term position that you previously held and still exists? Yes. Sorry, I had to think about that. I'm like, wait, is limited term represented by Sema? Yes, limited term is represented by Sema. Yep, yes, you would be able to bump into a limited term position. Okay, someone is asking privately. Let me read this and see if I can share it. Again, folks, please do share this. I don't know who this, okay, this member is not identified. It's a generic title. Okay, this doesn't seem to be confidential. Oh, thank you, Brittany. Of course, you're very welcome. Here's the question. If Sema does not meet the target amount to prevent layoffs, can we opt for 32 furlough days like Skippy in order to prevent layoffs, or at least reduce the amount of layoffs? So again, I'm going to answer this as I did before. We are not allowed to do that under the current addendum. Our only tool in the current contract to do that is to increase our number of voluntary reduced work hours, people who participate in that. We could reopen the agreement and approach the court and ask to do that. However, there's a risk to that, which is that the court's deficit has increased since we negotiated that, and they may say, great, you're on the hook for more. So can we opt for it? Yes, we could approach the court and try to do that. I think it's a risky maneuver, is my assessment of that. Okay, Brittany or Kim is starting something. It just says classification A. Please type the rest of that question.
I'll go ahead and just ask it.
Okay, yeah, I see you have your hand raised there. Okay, please.
Okay, so say an employee's been with the court 15 years, but they've only been in their classification for 10. And would they be, so that when they look at a classification, they're only going to look at the seniority of those 10 years, or are they going to look at the whole 15?
Great question. It's the full 15.
Okay.
For Sema, it is days of service. Your seniority is in no way connected to what classification you have held.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Tien is asking a question here. I held position X and Y and then Z. Okay, let's take it in that order. You were first position X, then you promoted to position Y, and then you promoted to position Z. If the court lays off position Z and Y, can I bump to X? Yes. Yes. And let me explain. So I'm assuming you want more of an explanation than just yes. So let me go back to the red line here so that we can look at this. Yes. So we go through the steps here, right? You'll notice that your current classification is being laid off. Okay. So you look at your prior classification. There's no in placement in your example. In your theoretical, there's no vacant positions lying around that you can claim. So now we go into bumping or displacement. First, you look, let me pull back up your theoretical here because I want to make sure I'm referencing it correctly so everyone can follow. Okay, so first we're looking at your Y position. There are none in your example. You don't have the seniority to claim the Y position, but you do to claim the X position. So yes, so you look around and you can't bump into the Y, but then we go to lower level positions. So you held X before you held Y. So then you can bump into the lowest level or lower, it doesn't have to be lowest, lower level position in your example X. So yes, you follow this step along and then you can bump into X. Of course, you have to have seniority to bump into X. So you have to have a seniority over somebody who holds that X code, and then that person gets displaced. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Who asked that? Tien, I hope that answers your question. Please confirm if I answered your question, or if
Yes, thanks, Zach.
Okay, certainly. Thank you, Tien. Okay, am I saying your name right, Tien?
Yes.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure. People mispronounce my name all the time, so I hope I did. L. Wang asks, why does the court still have extra help staff employed? Should these extra help staff be laid off before us? Absolutely. So they absolutely will. So I just go over that again. I just went over that here, and I know it's a lot of information, so I'm not throwing that at anybody. It's a lot of information. If you I've lived and breathed this stuff for 15 years, so this is pretty familiar to me. I know it's not to all of you. Who goes first? Extra help employees, probationary employees, then non-probationary employees. I believe everybody on this call is a non-probationary employee. I don't think the court has made any recent hires. So yes, you're absolutely correct. Extra help goes first. Now, it's extra help in that classification. It's not, is there an extra help person anywhere who exists in the court? It's extra help in that classification. Okay, I'll stop that share again so we can go back to videos. Okay, I hope that answers your question, El Wang. Please let me know if it didn't. John is saying grant money probably. Yes, so grant money, it can be a special case. Grant money is often why we have limited term appointments, and oftentimes why we have extra help appointments, is that it's tethered to a particular project or a particular grant money. In fact, right now, for those of you that are in ISB, you know that there's an RFP out that we're raising some significant questions about, but it is funded specifically by the Judicial Council, and I believe there's $117,000 that's earmarked for this particular project. So those are kind of examples where a contractor might be used, extra help or limited term might be used because there's a particular funding stream that's been identified. Okay, oops, several new private things are coming in. Let me address thank you, Mary. Let me address all this bumping has to be within Sema, right? No bumping of SEIU or Scipia. No, to Brandon, your question, you may claim a position anywhere in the court, even outside of Sema classifications. So it has to be one that you have held to bump. So you could bump into a Scipia, even a deputy sheriff's position, if that's one you held. I don't know why you would have, but if you did, you can bump into any position where the court is the employer. And we have a saying, time rolls downhill. So time in higher classifications rolls into lower classifications, even for Scipia and SEIU. I know that that's true for SEIU. I have not reviewed the Scipia contracts unless they changed that in their most recent contract. Time does roll downhill for your claiming rights. So what does that mean? Time rolls downhill. If you are in a classification that earns $100,000 a year and you're trying to claim a position out of the Sema unit that earns $80,000 a year, your time in the $100,000 a year position increases your in-class seniority for the lower level Scipia or Sema or excuse me, SEIU position. Okay, I have some 4 private questions. Again, guys, please, if these questions can be asked publicly, do ask that. CAC, are you guys getting a lot of private questions? Let me pause and let you handle some of those if you guys are. I see no and no. I see head shaking. No to Alex and Robbie. Okay, just give me a moment to review these 4 private questions that have come in. Okay, thank you for saying I can share this with everyone. Here's the question. Whoa, another one just came in and moved my thing. If I was promoted into this union, Sema, right before the end of the fiscal year, am I considered a probationary employee? Do I have bumping rights? You can share this question with everybody. So yes, you are considered a probationary employee. You have to serve, if you are a full-time employee within the court, your subsequent probationary period is 6 months. So whatever, I won't reveal your name because you sent it privately, but I thank you for letting me read your question. Whatever classification you promoted into, I'm making this up, you promoted into a court manager position. If you did that less than 6 months ago, you are still a probationary employee until you have served 6 months in that classification. Then you become a permanent in that code. If you've already met 6 months, I don't know how much further beyond this fiscal year you were promoted. If it was 5 months before, then it just rolled over, then you're permanent. Okay, another question. I'm going to read this out loud. This is not public at all, or private at all. I heard the court hired a new commissioner. Is there a way to see exactly when this commissioner was hired and why they would be hiring at this time? This is, in my view, an outrage. The bench is just out of touch with reality. Okay. They made this decision in February. They fired 50 plus people and did not revise the hiring of a commissioner. Unconscionable. Is it something that we can force them to do? Absolutely not. Go yell. I mean, you shouldn't do this. Do not yell at judges. I am appalled at the tone deafness and insular nature of the judiciary of this court. I cannot believe that they made this decision. It is so tone deaf, right? Oh, we're spending approximately 250,000. Someone's going to yell at me that I got that number wrong. More than $200,000, including pension benefit, et cetera, to hire a position when we just laid off. They didn't lay off Sema people, but they just laid off more than 50 people. It does not make any sense. Totally tone deaf. Shame, shame, shame on the court. And I realize this is going to be on a public YouTube thing after this meeting. Hey, judiciary, you're listening to me. I know most of you don't know who I am. Shame on you. I am really disappointed in the actions of the court, of the administration. I don't think the CEO, I have deep respect for the court as an employer. You really did a great job on this particular contract and trying to put people and your Sema membership first. And I thank you for that. Full stop. You blew it on this one, guys. You needed to take into account, you have people who have been laid off. They have a myriad of personal circumstances and financial obligations that they can't now meet. This is not the time to hire someone at $250,000 a year. Thank you for that question.
I guess I would add that I'm pretty sure from the last report I saw that we are still over allocated judges, and the Judicial Council actually got audited on this in 2019. So that's all, just some extra data points.
Yep,
that's in public record.
That is absolutely correct. And this is not public yet, but I will share with you that we are pursuing we are currently pursuing, and the Judicial Council is investigating a bungled RFP from executive management, and we'll see what the results of that are in the near future. And if we choose to make that public, if the court doesn't resolve that privately. Okay, someone else, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now. Someone else asked privately. Let me see if I can read this. If my classification gets laid off, I don't think this is confidential. If my classification gets laid off, does the court offer me the chance to bump down to my previous classification? Yes, so that's a great question. I think we covered it. You absolutely can bump down, but here's the process. As I mentioned, union gets 30 days notice, the individual gets 20 days notice. So you are notified that the layoff provisions have been triggered. This doesn't come as a surprise to you. It's not like somebody will show up to your desk and say, get out, right? You get the 20-day notification. You personally get the 20 days. Sema as a union gets a 30-day notification. And that's when we start applying the provisions of the layoff. So I'll be talking to you likely, I hope this doesn't happen at all, right? Right now, we're not talking about this. I hope this doesn't happen at all. But in your theoretical, you'd have at least 20 days of notice, most likely 30, and we'd walk through what positions you can claim, what vacancies there are. You need to be a participant, an active participant in that, but you don't need to call me and say, hey, I think they're going to lay off my position. I just want to, get my head and get your head in the game. No, we'll support you every step of the way on this one. Okay, Darren asks publicly. Oh, and I'm going to ask the person, this, can you please change your name to whatever your name is? It's sort of a generic name right now. Okay, Darren, thank you for publishing this publicly. Does in-placement clause apply only with opening/vacancy, or can you take a lower position that someone is currently in, even though you don't hold that position previously but qualify? Yeah, okay. So I understand your question. So Darren, yeah, you are correct. Does in-placement clause apply only with opening and vacancies? Yes. You cannot, it's called displacement. You cannot kick someone out of a code that you never held previously. You can only claim vacant funded codes that exist in the court. Then the second part of your question, or can you take a lower level position that someone is currently in, even if you never held that position, but you're qualified for it? No, you cannot displace or bump someone from a lower level position, even if you're qualified for it, if you never held that position. We call it employment rights. You do not have employment rights to that position. I am getting a stream of texts. Apparently, 5 of you really like the fact that I'm upset that they hired the commissioner. So, okay. Thank you, I guess. Someone is asking privately. They're saying, do not read this publicly. Hang on one second. This person is generically asking about a particular department and whether or not I believe layoffs are likely in that particular department. I can't say. I really can't give you an informed decision. I don't know at all. What I would say is I believe at this point layoffs are unlikely for if the current numbers approximately hold. Let's say we fall short a little bit, $50,000 or something. I would characterize layoffs for the Sema unit as unlikely this fiscal year, given where we currently are. If the court chooses layoffs to make up a very modest shortfall, I really can't say where I believe that's going to happen. They're going to have to pick some classification somewhere and lay it off. I would just be purely guessing if I said where it would, and I don't want to hazard a guess. John asks, Zeb, are classifications with 1 and 2 positions considered as one classification or 2? Let me see. I'm not really understanding that. John, can you unmute yourself and clarify that, please?
Zeb, I think he means, the alternately staffed positions.
Thank you, Steve.
Is that what you meant, John?
Yeah. So,
okay.
For example, I'm an information specialist 1, and there's also information specialist 2. Are those 2 separate classifications for layoff and bumping, or are they considered one?
They would be considered 2 separate classifications. So let's say somebody is currently, there are 3 people at the 1 level and 3 people at the 2 level. If the court said, I am laying off a 2, you would have to then claim a vacant 2 or a 1. And I guess there wouldn't be any vacant 2s to claim in this example. So it would be considered 2 separate classifications. Go ahead.
I'll say if a 2 never held a 1 position, can they bump a 1? If they got hired on directly as a 2?
No, you would not have held that prior classification. It's an alternately staffed classification, and you would not be able to claim the lower level 1 if you never held it. So you only, in this theoretical, you only would have achieved permanence in the 2 portion of the 1/2.
So even though they're called 1 and 2, they're really totally separate positions from a union perspective.
Correct. From a classification/union perspective, they are 2 classifications that are the term is alternately staffed. It's an alternately staffed position. So a 1 can promote to a 2 or without having to go and create a new code. However, you would not retain employment rights to a 1. You would only get it to the whatever levels that you have held in that code. Does that answer your question, John?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Sharon asks, theoretically, if the other unions do not meet their quota of savings under their contracts, would that impact how the court strategizes layoffs of Sema members? Yes. I say yes just because, you know, we're faced with a situation where ourselves and SEIU were advantaged by getting in early and negotiating with the court early. And at that time, there was a lesser deficit. And at that time, our portion of it was lesser. So if, for example, which we know, Skippy has had significant layoffs, if they're coming back and Skippy is howling that they're getting laid off and other people aren't, that could flavor how the court approaches us. I think at this stage, the court really values its relationship with Sema, and I think that goes a long way. So it is very difficult to say. Theoretically, yes. I just don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna take a hostile stance towards us. I don't think they have a reason to right now. Okay, this is another private one. Okay, it says I can read it. An email to a blind copied list of individuals went out, but did not go to all of Sema or all Sema managers about a work out of class opportunity for a court manager recently. 1, can the executive team continue to offer work out of class assignments while potentially laying off members? Absolutely. Work out of class is separate and apart from laying people off. 2, can work out of class assignments only be offered to specific individuals and not advertised? Yes. Work out of class is I guess I'll call it management prerogative, and can be offered selectively. So they can say, you know, worst case scenario, they could cruise by your desk, right? And just sort of informally say, hey, Joe Blow, the person who sent me this is not named Joe. Hey, Joe Blow, I think Zeb's going to be going on vacation for the next 3 months. He's got a lot of vacation coming to him. Do you want to work out of class in his position? And if you said yes, they could appoint you. It's not something that we have a right to a competitive process about. So I hope that answers that question. And I also appreciate that there's a dichotomy, right? Is that on the one hand, you've got the court cutting staff in many circumstances, and in others, they're flying an RFP for something that they need to hire contractors for, or they're renovating a courtroom to adhere, spending money on courtroom renovations to adhere to the public health officer's orders, or hiring a commissioner. Can they do those things? They can. They can. Is it responsible? That raises other questions. Okay. I don't have any other public. I believe I've answered all public or private questions. If I missed one, CAC or person who I missed, please jump up and down.
I have, Zeb, a question about the Skippy layoffs that you
Oh
may
my
or may
God,
not
I
have
realized we're well past time. I'm late, which is why I have a bunch of calls here. Sorry, I know we have a lot of people on this call, so I will continue. Sorry, go ahead. Whoever I just cut off, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I just was saying I had a question about the Skippy layoffs that you may have some insight to.
Okay.
I had heard there was reports that there are people who were of retirement age who got laid off. Since they were laid off essentially left out of the court or taken out of the court, even though they were employed for the next month, were they allowed to retire from the court before their official layoff? Or is that an option that they were given?
It is. It is an option that they were given, and some people exercised that. I don't know if everybody did, but they were allowed, or I asked that question of the court, and the court said, yes, they allowed Skippy people who were laid off to retire.
So that means that they didn't lose their retirement medical if they were eligible for it.
That is correct. And I would hasten to add that that's not a requirement that the court adhere to. So the court decided to offer that to Skippy members. Again, this is according to the court. I asked the court this. The court had no obligation to answer that question because I don't represent those people, right? They could say buzz off. I'm not answering your question. But the court stated that they did make that offer available to Skippy people, and that Skippy people, some took advantage of it.
Hey, Zeb, I wonder if that's, I wonder if that is a new development, because I have it on pretty high authority that that wasn't the case. But what the court, what I was told was that the vast majority of those 56 people had not vested in retiree health because they hadn't been there long enough.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
However, there were 2 individuals that had vested and lost it. So hopefully that was back then, and they changed their tune and allowed those people to get medical. But I heard the exact opposite. So.
Yeah. Again, certainly not, and that's why I prefaced it. Certainly not what I was told by the court. But I do not have a right to make an information request about that because I don't represent these folks, right? So, it sounds like, John, we have contrary information. My information is about 2 weeks old. I don't know how long how old your information is, Steve.
It's more like a week.
Okay, then you have more contemporary information. I just got, this is a public one. I know of someone that got retiree medical and he has 25 years on with the court. Thank you for sharing that, El Wang. Did that person, I'm assuming that person was Skippy and was laid off. Is that correct? He was laid off. Okay, thank you. So that's consistent with what I had heard. Steve, if you have that, I guess let's just chase it down so that we are providing accurate information, but it is certainly outside the scope of our representation. Because our job and the CAC's job, right, is to represent and advocate everyone who's a Sema member, right?
Hey, Zeb.
Yes.
I have a question regarding bumping. So if you are let's say a senior accountant.
Yes.
And you are hired into that position, and they decided to lay you off. There is an accountant 2 funded vacant position. Can you ask to be, since you're well qualified for that position, that to be put in that position?
You may in place into that position. So I'm going to share that again.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot claim
no?
it. You don't have a right to it under displacement. Okay. But because you qualify for it, you may you can claim a vacant funded accountant 2 position.
Okay.
It has to be vacant and funded, right? You can't bump somebody that was in it. But yeah, yes, you could claim it if it was vacant and funded.
Even though there's an accountant 3 that's already filled, you're not bumping that person, you're claiming a lower position.
Correct.
That's okay, right? And you'll keep your year of service, right?
So sorry, repeat that last part. I didn't hear that.
And you still keep your year of service, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You keep your year, whatever your seniority was, that your seniority is your seniority no matter what position you inhabit.
Got it.
Right. So yeah, you would keep that your say in this example, say it's 15 years, you keep your 15 years regardless of what position you're in. The only nuance to that would be is if you leave the Sema unit, you might have less seniority in that lower level position, but probably not because you were likely paid more in the higher position. And that higher paid time would roll down with you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay, well, I know we're 15 minutes over. Are there any closing questions that I might be able to address for people? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. CAC, did you want to make any departing statements?
I would say that we'll all touch base again soon after September 2nd. We'll have more numbers for everybody and see where we stand. At that point, we'll see if anybody is interested in doing voluntary reduced hours to close any gaps you might have. If we don't have any gaps, I guess one question I would have is, if we don't have gaps, do we still have the option of applying for voluntary reduced hours?
Absolutely, we do. It is not
Okay.
dependent on a funding shortfall. Through September 18th, anyone who wishes may, and it's not even subject to approval, anyone who wishes may reduce their work hours by as much as 20%.
Okay,
And
thank you.
so just for me personally, I want to thank Zeb for your patience and your understanding. This is a trying time for all of us, and I know that you've been, answering a lot of questions privately via email to a lot of our membership who are very nervous. So I just want to thank you very much for your patience and your time.
Of course, thank you, Georgia. And I would like to take.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that's call-in user 1. I'm not sure who that is, but thank you for your thanks. I also wanted to take this opportunity to really offer my heartfelt thanks to the CAC. I mean, these folks did an amazing job. As you know, they're volunteers. I'm getting paid for this, right? This is my job. But the CAC are volunteers. They're helping out in a very difficult time. And I think they got an excellent, excellent deal for everybody here. Unfortunately, you can just look next door, right, and see what happened to Skippy. And then the vastness of the difference between how we were able to negotiate and be treated versus them, very unfortunately. And I also want to take this opportunity to deeply, deeply thank Dimitra, who's not here. She served on countless bargainings and has announced her retirement. And someone who is here, my friend and yours, Alex Serrell. I really want to thank you, Alex, for your tireless efforts on our behalf. And Alex also has announced his retirement. So thank you, Alex. If you could show your face and say thank you, or do a hip hip hooray or something. So enjoy your retirement, and thank you for your hard work on this and your years of service to the court.
It was my pleasure. Most of all, I enjoyed working with you, Zeb.
Thank you. And then also, I do want to thank all of our members on the call who have so patiently helped, filled out the surveys, participated, been activists, and those of you who have chosen to separate or take the reduced work hours or the long-term leaves. I don't know if I should thank you or not, but I do feel thanks, because the fact that you are achieving these savings is really helping the rest of the unit that's staying behind. Because hopefully we will achieve that number and they won't be facing layoffs. So thank you as well. You're playing a part. Okay, well, that's it, folks. I really appreciate it. This will be uploaded later tonight and probably published tomorrow. So thank you all for your kind attention, and more to come, as Laura says, as we get more firm data on September 2nd. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the Sema website that it'll be published?
We'll publish it on our YouTube page and then send out an e-blast about it, Laura.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.